Hi, good evening. This is Eric Moore, and welcome to the September 30th, 1924 edition of the Town Meeting Study Committee, Committee of Concord, Mass. Um, I'm chair. We'll move into, so Eric Van Loon, greetings, everyone. So Eric Van Loon has agreed to clerk tonight. Thank you as well to Alice and to Parashar for also volunteering. I'll go through and do roll. We might be a little bit early for this, but no, we're good, actually. So Keith Bergman is not expected tonight. Katie Bresnick, would you say hello, please?
Here.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Kristen Haggerty, please.
Here.
Alice Kaufman, please. Sorry, Alice Kaufman, please.
I'm here.
Gotcha, yeah. Eric Moore, present. Parashar Patel, please. I see you. I don't hear you, though. Sorry. Where are you? Parashar Patel. Yeah, I'm not getting your audio, Parashar. I'm not sure why. Phil Swain, please.
Here in the car.
Got it. Thank you. Chase, will come back to you. And Eric Van Loon, please.
I'm here.
So new name on this list. Thank you, Eric. Chase Thompson, who, to my understanding, has not done the oath with the clerk yet. So not a voting member yet, but newly appointed by our appointing authority, Carmen Reese. Welcome, Chase. Thanks for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm bad with orientations and things like that. I think the proper thing to do would be to sort of introduce you to everybody on the team. And I'm kind of fumbling with that, but we'll get to know each other and we'll get to know you as well. So thank you. Moving into the agenda, typical public comment. So we have a few things that we're going to be talking about tonight, and I'll ask it for public comment. If you've got comments that don't relate to remote participation or less time at meeting, welcome that. If they're focused on that, we'll make sure that we have plenty of time for folks in the public to talk about that as we go along. I believe we have a set of meeting minutes to approve. Phil Swain, these are the minutes that you prepared from our, golly, I forget the meeting date. Do you recall, Phil?
I'm sorry. I couldn't hear you. You asked me-
Okay. You know what? We'll pass on this item, and I'll double check while we're talking and see if we can come back to approving minutes available from you. I have a set of minutes that I need to provide yet from our previous meeting. So chair's comments looking ahead. A big thing in my life, I guess our life, is the interview with me by Celeste was published in The Bridge last Friday. I was relieved to see that it was positive. I think I was pretty anxious about the interview. I have one comment to make, though, which is I made one statement which I think unfairly represents I made a statement which shouldn't be taken to represent the view of the committee. I said something about like there's no way that we would be early adopters on remote meeting technology, and I said we as opposed to my position. And it's not correct for me to have even inadvertently represented a potential position in the committee. So I apologize for that. I don't know if anybody else caught that, but I, and reading through, I went, oh, golly. And I think the other thing maybe was I kind of smoothed over was the process of, maybe adopting representative town meeting or town council. But I don't know. So I'm going to keep going. So again, our dates, the public forum on the 22nd, the select board, our interim report out on the 2nd, and the league forum on the 13th. One question I'd like to raise, and I don't have an answer for it. I should have a proposal for it, but I want to just sound people out, is that the public forum that we're doing is in person. I don't know whether or not Minuteman Media will cover that forum or not, but it's an in-person, not a hybrid event. And I think just in terms of accessibility, it would be good to have an instance of the forum that was Zoom only. That would make it easier for people to attend. Looking at the calendar, I can't propose anything before the end of the year. So I just want to float the idea of a Zoom-only public forum in January. Is that a thing that we might have appetite for, or should we come back to that in a later conversation? Any quick comments on that?
Well, a clarifying question. Are you saying that it's too late for us to build remote participation into our forum on the 22nd?
That's a good question. As we've conceived of and talked about, the forum is going to be an in-person only event. I think if we want to try to make it a hybrid event, we need to rethink the format for the forum. It's a good question. Let me ask this question then. Is there appetite, Carmen, I'll recognize you in a second. Is there appetite for a hybrid version of that forum as opposed to in-person only?
Well, one of the reasons that's a challenge, as you noted, is if we do kind of breakout groups.
Yeah,
Or even if people moved around to different breakout groups,
right.
then that's one of the I mean, you could certainly do it for the beginning and the end.
Right.
If people would find value in that. And I wouldn't be surprised if, Minuteman, I don't know how it's arranged, whether Minuteman
Yeah.
Media records that or not. And that would probably be good to have, just because it's going to be like a, brief update and a brief like summary of what the groups say, maybe.
Mhm.
But then, and then in terms of the online only, I think that would be great to do. And because I think we want to do a second forum anyway.
Yeah, okay. No, we do have an item on the agenda to talk more about the forum. So maybe I'll defer. I'll recognize Carmen, and then perhaps we can defer additional conversation on the forum until that item. Carmen, please.
Yes, sorry, that my comment is about the forum. I'm not sure that Harvey Wheeler is a great venue for hybrid meetings, and that is the venue that we've chosen. But in the event we did want to have a hybrid meeting or even a simultaneous Zoom meeting, you could certainly have breakout rooms and use the same small group discussion group format. And if there were if there were a couple of people who were willing to run the Zoom format, there'd be no reason why you couldn't do it the same night. I don't think. It just might not work as a hybrid.
Okay. Got it. So thank you. I think Eric, I'll recognize you, but it sounds like something we just need to think a bit more about. Eric, please.
Yeah, thanks. I think this is sort of our first big foray into public space, and
Yeah.
I think making it accessible to people on Zoom is or hybrid is a really important thing to do. And worst case, if they only got the opening and the general conversation and weren't possible to be in a breakout room, but then got the results back, that would be superior and important to do. And as Carmen just said, it seems to me even I mean, we've all been on Zooms with breakout rooms. So we very well might be able to pull that off. But whether we can or cannot have remote participation in breakout groups, I certainly would favor the rest of the meeting, the general sessions, being available to people remotely.
Okay, thank you. So we'll come back to this. I think the question is going to be what the format is going to be if we do have some combination of online and in-person experience. Parashar, the Pure 10 reporting, I hope I included that in the most recent packet. It was in the packet for a previous meeting. So do you have any comments on that? Any observations from just the overall set of information you got back?
Well, overall, I think the towns that responded back, I think 14 out of 16 did.
Yeah.
They struggles are on work. They're pretty much at the same place. A couple of them are actually studying their town meetings. All of them
Mhm.
want the responses back, so I'm planning to send those back to folks this week. But they're generally in line with what we've seen, right? High turnout for quote unquote controversial, expensive articles, and drops back down anywhere from 2 to 3% to I think 5 or 6%.
Yeah.
Steady state. That was one observation. I think 6 or 7 of them have actually adopted electronic voting,
Mhm.
which kind of struck me. That was more than I thought,
Sure.
frankly. And the other, so one of the other common elements is the consent agenda. Using the consent agenda, shorten things down. We're not the only town, by the way, that has multiple day meetings, but there are 3 or 4 others, but several others managed to get things done in the space of an hour. Or not an hour, sorry, one day, 4 or 5
Wow.
hours.
Sure.
So part of it maybe just Concordians are a talkative bunch and want to stand up and say something at a town meeting.
Good. Thank you. I don't have any follow-ups to suggest at this time. I think, let me recognize Kristen Haggerty, please.
Thanks for gathering the info. And I think that's just what we've seen, right? Everybody's been studying this, kind of coming to the same conclusions. Do we know that if after electronic voting was initiated, because I think some towns have been doing it for a few years now, did town meeting participation increase? Was there a higher turnout?
Yeah, so Kristen, I haven't followed back up with folks precisely because I think if we're gonna do follow-up, what I'm hoping to do is if folks are willing to send me specific follow-up questions, I can collate them and send them back so we're not
Perfect.
tapping everybody on the shoulder multiple
Oh yeah, no, absolutely
Yeah.
not. I didn't know if there was that
Yeah.
kind of data, but I think that would take a lot more.
Yeah.
Either they could reply anecdotally, or we could say, all right, this is when they instituted, and then go back and look. But okay,
Yeah, no, I agree. So if folks do have follow-up questions, send them to me through, I guess, Shannon. I'll collate them and send them out with the results and see what we get
Sure.
back.
Sure. I can say one follow-up for sure is going to be budget for clickers for electronic voting. What's the typical turnout for meeting, and what's the typical budget for clickers? So, and
Yeah,
also, do they rent or own?
Yeah,
I
what I
think that-
might do on that one,
yeah.
Eric, because almost all the respondents were the moderators. I think
Hmm.
on the clicker details, what I might do is get us the name and contact info for
Sure.
somebody at the town to whom we can
Sure.
talk, we have that more detailed information.
Good. Very good. Thank you.
Yep.
Recognize Katie Bresnick. Katie, your hand has went down. Gone
Yes, my
down.
question
Sorry.
was around the mechanism for electronic voting and wondering whether anyone uses like the smartphone apps, which I've been reading about in the materials distributed, or whether
Hmm.
that's still in the future.
I think that's a future thing. The clickers that we're talking about here are little dedicated appliances distributed at meeting that run on sort of a captive RF network. So they're little things. They're not our things. They're their things.
Yeah, I didn't know if anyone was working with future apps and things like that to
Yeah.
make it not have to have an actual appliance that's distributed.
Got it. Thank you. Carmen, please, and then Eric.
Just 2 things. One is the Mass Moderators Association has collected information on towns that use electronic voting in a spreadsheet indicating which vendor they use, whether they own and whether they rent. And I think that I can share that. I believe it's been shared with other towns that have been studying what to do when they're thinking about adopting electronic voting. And the second thing that I will mention is the moderator in Carlisle just circulated Carlisle just adopted electronic voting. They bought their clickers, and another town asked if they could borrow Carlisle's clickers.
Hmm.
And so he created a template for borrowing clickers, for one town loaning clickers to another town, which he circulated for those people who maybe want to be thinking about that in the future. So for example, if you buy your clickers and you have you have a certain number, which is normally adequate, but you're expecting a giant turnout on a particular issue and you know you need a few more, then you could borrow in other towns. So I just mentioned those two things, and I can share that template as well.
Good, thank you. Eric Van Loon, please.
Two thoughts in there, sort of along the Keith's earlier formulation of value questions. I think it was Kristen that asked, or somebody asked whether, wanting to know whether using clickers increased participation, which would suggest, does that mean more people show up? I think that in addition to that, there's the question that we're looking at in lots of different ways, and that is, does it make the meeting quicker, smoother, easier, even if it's the same number of people? Just
Yeah, fair enough. So we're getting a little bit into it's a really interesting topic, right? But I don't want us to sort of work on clickers tonight. We've got a meeting scheduled for that, and we'll have a lot of data, so to speak, from I think at least one town that's using clickers as a point of reference. But thank you for your question, Eric.
Now, the other point that I wanted to raise, and it relates to Parashar and the Peer Town reporting, and I echo the thanks, Parashar, for your work on that. One of the reports that I read, and it might have been Westford, but I can't recall, I thought made a very important frame for thinking about participation, and that I think I'm going to be urging that we do that, or at least consider. And that is, there was a citation, only 2 to 5% or never up to 10%, that participation is low. I think that that's in essence an inappropriate measure and an impossible bar. And what one of the other towns did was look at what is the actual turnout of voters on at the polls at times when it doesn't coincide with a state election or a federal election, and that is really a much clearer indication of sort of what percentage of the population is remotely tuned into town government, period. And they then measured number of physical participants at open town meeting as a percentage of people who cared enough to vote and in a town only election context. And I think that's something I would urge us to consider as well.
Good, thank you. I'm going to move on. Alice Kaufman met with the head of the Commission on Disabilities, and blanking on her name. The report from Alice was in the packet. Alice, I don't know if you had any additional comments relative to the write-up that you sent me and then I put into the packet.
No, I don't think there's anything additional. It was, her name is Jean Goldsberry.
Thank you.
She is both the current chair of the Disabilities Commission, and she also runs Minuteman ARC. So she had some really good, insightful things for us to consider, some easy fix things that maybe we thought of, maybe we haven't, that would make the experience of town meeting easier for people with disabilities. And one of that I thought, well, yeah, of course, let's have large print documents. She said she'd never seen large print documents available on the table, and it makes sense. Something simple that someone who's more attuned to people with disabilities coming and participating fully would think of. So it was basically an hour and a half long conversation, covered a lot of ground. And so I took on the highlights and I read them back to her to make sure I didn't miss any of what she thought were the important points that she would like us to at least consider in making meetings more accessible, both the pre-hearing meetings and town meeting.
Good.
She particularly pointed out that the acoustics in the hearing room at the townhouse are very difficult to hear.
Thank you. Any comments on that? Any questions on that from anybody? I see none. I'm going to move on. So one question that we have, I think I've heard a few comments from a few people that it would be good to start meeting in person or at least in hybrid. I think, the soonest we would do that would be the 15th of October. I'll say though, in thinking about it, that I don't think Shannon returns until the 15th, and Donna McIntosh is supporting us in Shannon's stead. And I'm just not sure how the logistics work out, even to sort of, you know, arrange a room, so to speak, before Shannon is back online. But let me just ask, do we have appetite for meeting face to face, or are we comfortable with remote only? Any comments on that? Katie, please.
While I do love seeing all of you in person, in general, meeting remotely is a bit easier for me with my family stuff. And I often find hybrid meetings are a bit challenging to participate as a remote person when most people are in the room. So I do prefer remote only, but it is nice to see everybody. But just wanted to put my 2 cents in.
Good, thank you. Eric Van Loon, please.
I miss seeing you guys in person. I think it's the quality of discussion and the experience is different. And I'm on a couple boards where we have been able to manage well with a skillful chair and another person helping. If most of us are there, but there's a few remote, to make sure that they're part of the conversation.
Got it. Thank you. Kristen Haggerty, please.
I too am in favor of in-person meetings, although I don't care for their inconvenience as much, but I do feel like the quality of discussion is better. And I agree, if there's just, you know, 1 or 2 people remote and we make an effort to make sure to include them, it works really well.
Okay, good. Thank you. I'm going to move forward unless there are any other comments. Moving forward. So the fall timeline, we're here at the 30th. We'll be talking about remote participation tonight and a little bit about less time at meeting. Coming up on the 15th, the theme will be shorter meetings, things like the consent calendar. Got the public forum on the 22nd. The 28th, we'll begin with the question of privacy, secret ballot at town meeting, and then we'll go into clickers, because I think the privacy conversation will really frame our consideration of clickers as electronic voting as well. Then on the 12th of November, less effort to attend. And a big piece of that, I think, will be talking about separating deliberation and voting, specifically to the application of the referendum ballot town meeting. And we'll also, you know, we will have had results from the survey by then. So we'll know a lot more about appetite for representative town meeting, and conditioned on that, we'll spend more time with that or not. Eric, I see your hand up. Did I not recognize you, or you have something new?
Old and slow. Thought I had
Fair
said
enough.
that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So that's all right. There's a lot of that going around, you know. So it's okay. Thank you. You know, the meeting on the 25th, which I guess is just before Thanksgiving, we'll be reviewing what we're going to go to the select board with, and the packet for that needs to come out. I think it'll go out on, I think, of the 27th. Select board meeting on the 2nd, and we'll have a meeting on the 9th to be determined, and then the Friday forum for the 13th of December. And so that's the fall timeline. Katie Bresnick, please.
Just a question. Can you remind me, so do we need to have our recommendations that are requiring warrant articles done by the, let's say, the 25th of November? Is that right?
Yeah, now that's my interpretation. Now, honestly, we're going to go to them with whatever we have. You know, we're not going to make stuff up just for the meeting, so to speak. And I think, you know, we're working through our work here, and I think we'll know a few things indefinite by then. But I think the whole package of what we might want to consider for town meeting for the coming year, I don't know if we're going to have everything that we're going to have everything that we'd like to have considered. So we just have to go with what we have. The idea is that it is an interim report. I think it would be good to have some questions of the select board as well, as we look for guidance. So it's not like it's a report out. It's not a deadline, if that makes sense. And I think, you know, if in fact, my understanding is if in fact we wanted to have a warrant article or a committee proposal or whatever, I think I would expect that we would go there with a sketch of those things and not necessarily the verbatim language. In part because the warrant, I believe, opens in January and doesn't close until the end of January. So we'd have some time as a committee to work through whatever language would be appropriate.
So I think it might make sense to try to sprinkle in some decision-making over the next couple of meetings. Because I
Yeah.
know some of these topics are very robust and will take a lot of time for discussion. So I'm afraid we
Yeah.
might run out of time in order to, come up with some of those recommendations we want to talk about then. So just something to think about.
Good point. Thank you.
I
Um,
agree too. And remember,
Yeah.
some of the things that we'll be discussing, many of them probably don't need town meeting vote, which means they don't need warrant articles. There's
Yeah,
probably things
exactly.
that are implemented by the moderator.
Oh, just
Yeah.
making
Most
sure
of
that
them
was you.
probably are, so.
Yeah.
But I really agree with the decision making, and like, so that way we can kind of come to consensus. We've discussed it. Most of us are in favor, all of us are in favor. That really kind of lends some more credence to the recommendations.
Good, thank you. Moving forward, so Katie Bresnick will be doing some outreach for the survey, which is concordma.gov/TM survey for a URL that takes you right to the town our study page. Can we get someone to reach out to the Council on Aging?
I did.
Okay,
That's
cool.
me, and I talked to them today.
Oh, cool, thank you.
We did say we could provide some printed copies, or did I make that up?
Yeah, the thing would be to call the town office and ask for printed copies.
Yeah.
If it makes sense, I can ask Donna to run some printed copies and I could run them over to the COA.
Well, I said that I'd bring them over and then send her a file also so she could print more. And then the other thing I asked was, if they want to have like a little, little meeting,
Yeah.
like a little brainstorming session or something. So they're going to get back to me about that. But
Oh,
I
cool.
didn't know, because I know that we entered the electronic, a survey, but I think you can print it. You can print it, so that we can
Sure.
print it, right?
Okay. So I'm really happy for you to run with that. And I think if you need support in terms of getting a legible hard copy, I can help you with that, or you could go to Donna McIntosh,
Okay.
who's again subbing for Shannon on that.
Yeah, Donna knows me. I'll
Okay,
ask.
cool.
Thanks,
I
Donna.
bet.
I can help
Thank
out.
you. All right, thank you, Donna. Any other outreach that we want to do? Any other organizations that people want to sign up for at this stage? The other thing is if we want to get a letter to the editor in the Bridge for the 10/11 edition of the paper, that should get out, I think, probably by Thursday. If anybody wants to write a letter saying, hey, I don't know what it would be. This is why town meeting is important to me, or what I'd like to know about town meeting, or Kristen Haggerty?
I know,
Yeah.
I think that's great. I'm just picturing, I just came from the public hearing about the residential tax exemption.
Yeah,
So that's gonna suck up a lot of the Bridge, at least in the next week. It was like a
understood.
mini town meeting going on right there, so
Yeah,
let's see what shakes out there.
okay,
But yes, I really like the idea of kind of like what town meeting means to me and other
Yeah.
folks like that. So at some point, I'm happy to do a guest piece for sure.
got it. Pick your date, all right, please. Moving forward, I have a guest piece to write. I was invited by Celeste as the chair of the committee to write a guest piece for the Bridge, 400 words. I don't know what I'm going to write yet. I think if I think about some things, it would be, the idea of engaging with the work of the committee and the survey and so on, letting us know what you want. I'd love to hear from people who really don't like town meeting, So one thought is to talk a little bit about town meeting as a legislature. I have to go back and reread the interview because I think there's a bit of an overlap there. I want the editorial to be interesting. And my other thought is that, to use the guest piece to frame a little bit the two forum questions, right? What would make town meeting better? And what do you think? Can we agree to disagree? And what is our responsibility and accountability as citizen legislators? Really open to suggestions there. If anybody has anything that they want to email me for ideas, I'd really appreciate that informally. And something I'm trying to get a draft out this week. So that's top of mind for me. Moving forward. So the October Public Forum, we talked a bit about this. The idea was a focus group, a very short intro from me or somebody else, I think it would be appropriate to introduce the team. If, for folks who are there. The idea with the focus group is we split up into small groups, 7 to 10 people. And we've, basically each of us facilitates a group. We don't know how many people are going to come. And so I'll get you in a second, Alice, and then Parashar. I think this, with the prospect that maybe we try to do the forum as hybrid, I think this is completely up in the air at this point. Let me just go to Alice Kaufman, please. You're on mute, Alice. I'm sorry.
Sorry, this is to go back to the last comment about you writing a piece, 400-word piece for the Concord Bridge. I was just going to offer to assist if you'd like some help in framing the way that an editorial would work.
If I'm using my language carefully here, if you wish to send me some ideas about that, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Parashar, please.
Yeah, this is on the forum, actually. I'm seriously thinking about, I think we should seriously reconsider a in-person meeting only. I mean, think a little bit about the message that sends by making the public forum inconvenient to attend for many of the people that might want to attend, when our charge is to try to increase participation at town meeting. It's just the optics of it, for those that can't attend in person, I just think outweigh maybe not, I agree, in-person forum with breakouts can yield a different type of output quality-wise.
Mhm.
But the optics of it, given our charge, just looks bad.
So I hear you on that. The irony is a little bit richer than I'm comfortable with. So thank you. Katie Bresnick, please.
First, I have two questions, or one comment, one question. I'm curious for the forums, what participation usually looks like. I'm sure it's quite variable, but I've never been to one, so it's easier to plan having a better idea of what it looks like.
The League of Women Voters Forum that just was with committee chairs, current committee chairs in town government, had in person, from what I could see, less than 50. I mean, maybe 40.
That
Let me
was
go to
in the
Carmen.
library,
Yeah, that was
which is a better place for acoustics.
Yeah. Carmen Reese, please.
Yeah, it really varies how many people come to forums like this. I've seen really big turnouts for housing and planning board issues, and then some really small turnouts for other things. So it's hard to say. I'm just going to suggest to you that you have both myself and Cameron on deck to be facilitators if you need us, but use us last.
Yeah. Good, thank you. Kristen,
I just
please.
had
Yeah.
one comment briefly about the bridge piece. I'm hearing a bit of an echo.
Yeah, I can't figure out where that's coming from. Try again, Katie.
Just a suggestion, if you're having trouble putting a piece together, you could use AI to put together a first draft for you with your points, and it might give you a good start, but just a suggestion.
All right, thank you. Anybody else on the forum? I
mean, I have something like, since we're talking about, in person or not, in person or hybrid, I guess it really depends on, do we want small breakout groups, or do we just want,
right.
to have one-way feedback where like people come up and they say, this is what I think. It's like, that's the hearing that's going on tonight. When we've done this forum at the planning board level in Harvey Wheeler, it's been like several years now, I think we had about 5 or 6 breakout groups,
Right.
7 to 10 people each. And so, and with sticky notes and things like that. So it was like a real working session.
Yeah.
And so I mean, are we open to, and it felt like more dialogue for people rather than everybody kind of sitting there and just listening to one person comment at a time. And so I think that would be, for our group to decide, you know, how would we feel? Would we trade accessibility? So, you know, we could have more people online, but it means kind of only one person can speak at a time. So we might not hear from as many people total. Or are we going to say, you know, for accessibility, we're going to have one in person and then we're going to have a second one entirely, you know, online. And that would kind of accommodate multiple audiences, but just perhaps at two different times.
Well, from what thank you. So from what I'm hearing is it would be good if we had, if we took a real look at having at least a hybrid format. And so the question would be, I think, how would that play out, right? So we have, we need to arrange some sort of coverage from Minuteman, or some other sort of way of broadcasting via Zoom. The introductory stuff goes to the room and goes out. When we go into our breakouts, the people in the room, so to speak, we've got breakout groups there, but there's one or more breakout rooms online for the people who are attending online. Then after we finish the breakouts, we come back together. The folks online, you know, whoever the facilitators are for the online groups, can speak to the whole group. And then the folks who are in the room, so to speak, come up to the mic or whatever and talk that way, so that we do have both rooms hearing the same summary information. That's what comes to mind for me. So it's really, you know, common, separate, coming back together. Does that make sense to you, Kristen?
I mean, that's fine. It's quite a bit to juggle online facilitators as well as like, you know, I've done this for larger events. This one wouldn't be that big. Would we consider at all a change of venue to see if we could go to the library?
Well, the library, we explored that early on, and the problem is that the library closes at 8 and our event starts at 7. So, yeah.
Yep. Okay. Unless we want to start at 6 and
Yeah.
But okay, yes. I mean, so it can be done. And so then how many facilitators would you, I mean, we have a fairly large committee, so one would be, we'd have to know, can everybody attend that night? Would
Right.
everybody, you know, I mean, I don't
Right.
see why we wouldn't try it. What's the worst that could happen? You know,
Yeah,
we're gonna
exactly.
have
Yeah.
another chance again. So
Yeah, exactly.
doesn't hurt.
So it sounds like, you know, if we can get staff support, plus at least one member of the group who's, you know, Zoom fluent, to facilitate online, and then we get other people in the room. And, you know, if we've got 50 people, right, you know, that's 4 groups of whatever. Chase, please.
Hey,
Hey.
sorry, I'm new, so forgive me if this is redundant. Is
All
the
good,
goal of
Chase.
this, thank you, is the goal of this to get as many opinions as possible or facilitate a like seamless group discussion? Like, I guess which of those two
Yeah.
things are we optimizing for?
I think somewhere in the middle. I think we would like the people who have energy to come to feel like they've been heard. We'd like the opportunity to explore a little bit where their attitudes are. Like, you know, why I think town meeting should be shorter. Why? Right? So a little bit of
Yeah.
dialogue that way. And I think, you know, as always in a focus group format, it's really valuable to hear what other people think and why they think that way. So I would hope for depth over breadth, if that makes sense.
Okay. Yeah. My experience is I've been on probably 30 attempts at hybrid Zoom in-person meetings, all of them quite poor. And I think that we would have an opportunity to capture a wider audience if we did them at separate times and potentially even share learnings from the first with the second. So that would be, that was my gut reaction when this was discussed, only from past experience.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. So do we need to so let's see, we're gonna have another meeting on the 15th. So I think let me put it this way. I think between now and the 15th, I'll be working on a couple of proposals. I might reach out to individuals informally to get some ideas. And then on the 15th, we'll discuss in a kind of a real nuts and bolts way how a forum might work, either purely in person or in a hybrid format. And at that time as well, I'll propose a date for a second forum. Again, I don't see room in the calendar for something this fall, but I'll explore that as well, and then see what we think about it. But I think what I see is that we need to actually kind of make a decision as a group about how we're going to do the forum, and that we don't quite have all the information we'd like right now. I recognize Parashar, please.
Thank you, Eric. And I would encourage us to pick a second date in the fall,
Mhm.
even if we don't use it. Right? If we go to
Mhm.
hybrid for this one, we don't
Yeah.
use it. I would, because again, I think about the optics. If we go with an in-person only,
Right.
recommendations in November, and then we do something in the spring hybrid, not everybody gets a full say. So
Sure.
just
Sure.
let's nail a date even if we don't use it.
Okay. Katie, please.
Yeah, I agree with Parashar. I think they should be close in date. I know we mentioned briefly earlier, potentially holding them in tandem. So maybe some of us are on the Zoom forum and some of us are doing the in-person forum. And so
Oh,
they're
sure.
separate, but occur at the same time. And so we don't have to worry about the logistics in person to kind of share with the
Right.
technology, which will be quite challenging. So if we do
Yeah.
Zoom and in-person only, that might work the best.
Good, thank you. I think, 1 second, Carmen. I think this is a committee meeting. I need to double check how open meeting law applies. But if it is a committee meeting, we need to be careful about a quorum. We have a parallel event. Carmen, please.
Yeah, if you're deliberating, it's a committee meeting. In an excess of caution, you can just post it and it's
Yeah,
fine.
good.
I was just going to note that if you want to do simultaneous but not hybrid sessions, if you want to do an in-person session and a Zoom session in parallel, then you might need volunteer facilitators beyond the number
Right.
of people on the committee, and the League of Women Voters is a great place to look for that.
Good, thank you. Very useful. Thank you. Okay, moving forward. Let me just ask the public, do you have any comments in terms of the forum? Are there any public comments about our proposed forum that would inform us at all? Checking once, twice. Okay, moving forward. So our previous meeting, we talked about this, but we had 3 people in the meeting. So I just want to revisit this, and apologies to the folks who were there. And again, I don't know if people have watched the videos of the meeting or not. So I'm assuming this is new information. So as we go forward, right, I've sent out a few things for a packet a few weeks ago, or a few meetings ago, with a lot of detail. But basically, I've tried to identify themes for our discussion this fall that are things that deliver into, so to speak, the planning timeframe around the select board meeting. I'll come back to this. And so as we talk about solutions, I wanted to propose a little bit of a rubric, not a formal rubric, but just, how do we talk about this stuff, right? What's the idea? What would it help? What's the impact? Is it a big impact, a small impact, and so on? Is it going to be hard to make it work? Is there cost involved in terms of licenses or people time? Who has say in making it work? Is this a select board decision? Is it the clerk's decision, and so on? And so as we talk about these things, having a little bit of structure helps us get through it. Again, here's a bit of a timeline for what we're going to be talking about, in my view. And we'll come to this question as to sort of, are we missing things that we should be talking about this fall? So less time at meeting. How do I budget my time at meeting? And we'll come back to this, but this is sort of a theme for tonight. We have one suggestion from a citizen about deliberating 2 nights and voting the third. We'll pick that up on November 12th because it relates to another topic we'll be talking about. The next time, our next meeting, a shorter meeting overall, the consent calendar, public norms for debate. We'll talk about clickers in 1028. You can argue, other things that will fit into 1028. Excuse me. And then less effort to attend. Things about meeting schedule. We're talking about remote voting tonight. And then other elements. Are there things that surface for anyone that we should add to this list? It's a full list, but we can always talk about more. Katie, please.
I was doing a little bit of a cross check against what you have and what we have on the survey. And I think
Yeah.
one of the items that's on the survey that doesn't appear here is talking a little bit more about speaker time and whether we
Uh-huh.
want to decrease the amount of time that speakers have during the deliberation.
Okay, and that would fit into a shorter meeting overall. Noted.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, good. Thank you. Kristen, please.
Can you say again the difference between shorter meeting overall and less time at meeting? I think we're saying
Yeah,
less
yeah.
time at one time because if we made the meeting shorter overall, like
Yeah.
we're gonna have to kind of talk about them almost in tandem, not in isolation.
Well, specifically though, it's like, if hypothetically, right? If I only really care about the school budget, right? Because my kids are in school, that's the thing that I'll make time to show up and vote for. And the other stuff, so it's how do I budget my time so that I can really participate in the issues that matter most to me. So it's that, and a shorter meeting overall is that, we take a meeting that runs notionally 12 hours and bring it down to 9 hours or 6 hours. So less time at meeting is about me, and shorter meeting overall is about the warrant in effect. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yes, it
Yeah.
does.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Katie, another question?
Yeah, I was going to say on that same topic, I also find the wording to be something that I have to think a lot about each time to remember what each one is. So I wonder if it might make sense to, as a shorthand, to rename the second one to like budgeting time at meeting or
Sure.
planning in-person attendance or something to that effect.
Uh-huh.
So it's a little bit more descriptive and less confusing.
Good.
But I get what you
Thank
mean.
you. Thank you. Good.
Yeah, because I think if the meeting was shorter overall, then the budgeting my time becomes less consequential or something. That's why I think they're intimately
Sure.
related.
I see that. Chase, please.
Is this what we're discussing at the forum? That's what this bullet point is, or is this the totality of the topics?
This is the
overall?
totality of topics for the fall. The forum is going to really, we hope, focus on what the folks who attend, what their perceptions are about meeting, what their suggestions are about meeting. We may find that they talk about some of the stuff that we're talking about here, but I really don't know what to expect.
Okay. I guess I would add to this like awareness of the meeting and its topics. Quick poll of 30-something-year-olds in my
Yeah.
network. I would say
Right.
about 60% were unaware that we have a town meeting, and 90% were unaware of what was discussed at it. And I
Got it.
fall into the 60 until I
Got
was
it.
tapped. So
Got it. Yes. We have a kind of a line of work around communication that I'm thinking to really sort of dive into after the select board meeting. I think some of the bits around quickly leveling up low information voters speaks to that communication stuff. But good point. Thank you. Kristen, please.
Chase, we are so glad that you're on and you're asking questions already. This is terrific, and we're probably going to give you all kinds of homework assignments to next time you're out at the park, you're going to ask these questions, things like that. But one of the things that we realized, and you'll see there's a lot of information on the meeting page for town meeting, because in addition to the packets that Eric has prepared for each meeting, there's also all of the majority of these studies that were done by other towns, including Concord, things like that. So there's this bulk of information. But what we can tell you is certainly in the last 30 years, there's a finite number of issues that they've identified, almost all entirely the same. There's a finite number of solutions essentially that have been proposed and tried with kind of the same, and we're still kind of doing the same thing. We're kind of in this loop. So kind of what we're looking at now is probably what is the combination of new or different solutions that maybe hadn't been tried to kind of explore things differently to see if there's maybe a different outcome. And then it's also kind of what outcome are we seeking? And that's what a little bit we talked about at the beginning. So that's why, your questions are so good, just to make sure, we're not missing anything, because otherwise we're just kind of regurgitating things that have been talked about for decades.
Good. Thank you. Katie, please.
Yep. Also want to echo Kristen's point that I think all the questions are really great. I would consider myself kind of a low information voter until coming into this committee as well. So I think there really is an educational gap, especially among people, you know, in the demographic that Chase mentioned, of which I include myself as well. And so I think that could come, as Eric mentioned, after making recommendations that require warrant articles. So really focusing on education and how to reach folks after that initial meeting, because that won't require an actual warrant article, I think, in most cases or all cases, but I think
Right.
should be a key focus after the fall for sure.
Good, thank you. Carmen, I'm joking about this, but perhaps town meeting should sponsor a youth soccer team. So that's humor. Okay, moving forward. Okay, so remote participation. So backdrop, I don't know if folks, I'm sorry, I just sent the document out as soon as I found it today. There's a report from the Massachusetts Moderators Association, Town Meeting 2040. That was written, at least in draft form, a few years ago in 2019. That document is very comprehensive, in my view, in terms of a look at what remote participation could be and some of the issues around making it work. Yeah, the Wayland Elvis Committee, it's their town meeting committee, focusing on both electronic voting and the prospect of remote participation. David Allen hooked me up with Dave Bernstein as the chair of that committee. So I had a very good conversation with him today. David Carr and David Allen from Concord, our Davids, have been working on the prospect of remote participation. I think David has said for about 10 years. So a lot of work there, both in terms of the vision for what it could be and on approaches. And then, you know, just this year, we had an article and from Scott and Mark for basically saying, look, you know, let's get the ball rolling in terms of a proposal with the state, home rule petition for the state. And you know, of course, you know, over the last few years, it's the world of remote work with Zoom, with Microsoft Meet, with Google Meet and Microsoft Teams. And so tonight, what I'd like to discuss, so a few things to talk about, right? Is remote participation a good idea for our town meeting? How much do we need to know before we make a recommendation about going forward with a home rule petition? What do we know or not know about how it would work, both in terms of the kinds of services that we offer and how it would work, you know, technically or operationally? And then, you know, again, how would the project of legislative approval work? So, and again, I'd like to focus on 1 and 2 and see if we have a consensus on that. What I'll do is I'll go through this slide, and I want to give David Allen and David Carr, who've worked hard on this issue, a couple of minutes to talk as well about specifically the question is remote participation a good idea for our town meeting? Right, I think David Allen and David Carr have talked about the idea of remote participation as a third room at meeting. If the 2 rooms at meeting are the gym and the auditorium, the space of remote participants is the third room. And I'll say, you know, imagine a Zoom meeting with secure voting as a way to think about remote town meeting. What is participation? Well, you know, we think about being able to vote remotely, but it's also listening to what's going on in the room or to others online. It's like a hybrid meeting, right? That we can see each other, that we have opportunities to speak and to vote and to be seen as well. And I think, you know, benefits that we can talk about, and we will, I think that the one that stands up is more could participate, right? We could come to town meeting without leaving our homes, as it were. Other benefits include, I would say, you know, the likelihood of a private vote from the remote voters at town meeting. I don't know if this is a benefit or not, but the idea that, you know, I could multitask, I could cook dinner during town meeting. I don't know how I feel about that. We can talk about that, right? And so I think, and, you know, David Allen has made this point that, you know, a hybrid town meeting is not the same as being in the room, but one could say it's also better than not having access as well. So that's a quick introduction to the idea of remote participation for town meeting. David Allen or David Carr, I'll give you a couple of minutes to amplify on those comments, focusing on, is this a good idea or not? And then I'll go around and I'd like to get people's initial thoughts on this. David Allen, I'll recognize you, please. Yep.
Thanks, Eric. Got my hand down here. I'm in Maine. I'm not sure I have the bandwidth for video, so I think I'm going to turn it off.
Fair enough.
Maybe a very quick anecdote conveys a sense. I'm a kid from a farm in Indiana. When I got myself into being responsible for the secret ballot at town meeting, Lord knows, goes back decades now. I've been handed off from one moderator to another, including Eric and Carmen. I fell in love with town meeting. And yet, as I did it, I realized, you know what, we got a problem here. There are people like Katie Bresnick, who's been so clear about this, that when we put it the way I think about it, 30 and 40 somethings with kids at home, they just can't spend all this time in this room. And that got me started years ago, roughly the time that Carmen became our moderator. I even approached Carmen then, we talked about it, and we had the good fortune to invite David, and we've got a very robust partnership to move this ahead. There's a lot to talk about here. What I want to underline is that if we care about this direct democracy that, as you hear, I fell in love with, I come from a part of the world where it's inconceivable that you show up and, my goodness, you can vote. And guess what I've learned? It's really not the voting that it's about. It's the deliberation, the debate. Miraculous. If we want that to thrive, we need to make it more widely available. And it is technologically very possible. Let me be quiet and invite David Carr if he may have some thoughts on the subject.
Thank you, David Allen. David Carr, I'll recognize you for 2 minutes, please.
Yeah, thanks. So I guess there's a little bit repetition of David Allen, but actually, the reason I started with town meeting was I had two coworkers in my first job who both went on about the merits of, and they didn't live in Concord, they lived in other towns, but they would say, you've got to go to town meeting. It's the only way to know what's going on in town. And at the time, I didn't live in a town with a town meeting, at least not an open one. But I don't know. I came back, and when I got to Concord, I find that, does Concord have a town meeting? It does. I showed up. I was hooked, because it was really, there really was a lot of back and forth between the public and the government and so forth. I did learn a lot. And eventually sucked me into 15 years of service on town committees and boards. So so it's a real so I think the idea of getting that getting that feeling that you could go up and speak to a microphone on a topic when it actually matters to you is an important draw.
Mm-hmm.
It's and a way to draw people in, a little bit less, it's just a little bit less static that way than when you're just watching it on TV.
Good, thank you.
Could I just a moment, Eric?
Succinctly, please. Yeah.
Just to notice that the both of us think we might be most useful if you gathered here would ask us what it is the biggest puzzlement to you about remote participation. We'd like to bring to you what it is we've been up to and what we've been able to find out. We don't know if we got it right, but please ask us.
Yeah. Thank you, David. So what I'd like to do is to just go through the committee and get people's initial take on the question of remote participation. Do you think this is a good idea for our town meeting? Yes or no, and maybe why or why not, please. Who would like to start? Parashar, I saw you first, so please.
So, I think it's a good idea to explore,
Uh-huh.
because it lets people participate without having to go in to a particular place. The multitasking, frankly, lots of people multitask when they're in the school
Yeah.
anyway. I think it's just a matter of going in and out. You can easily pop in and out, you can leave, come back, whatever. So I think that's certainly more comfortable.
Mhm.
My one concern is technology glitches when you have 300 or 400 folks, right?
Uh-huh.
Sure. Hopefully there's solutions to that, but we
Mhm.
should at least explore it, not let that potential glitch
Sure.
stop us from pursuing it. So I'm all in favor
Uh-huh.
of pursuing this.
So let me thank you. Let me restate that, which is that if the tech were not a question, you'd like the idea.
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. Kristen Haggerty, please.
Question for David and David. On the previous surveys other towns have done where they've asked questions, who's in favor? I've seen like upwards of 60+%, and one broke it out by age group. But what is the drawback, if any, that you've seen to remote participation?
Eric, do you want us to answer, or what's your pleasure, sir?
Yeah, go ahead.
In simple words, Eric's already touched this. He's, among other things, got me thinking about it. When I have done United Nations meetings, I've done many of them in person in Geneva and Tunis and so forth. But otherwise, I've been remote with other people around the world. When you're remote, you are always second class. You can push the technology as hard as possible to move you closer and closer to first class, but you've already gotten into. I've been so grateful to listen to your discussion about how to handle the first. My goodness, what a fruitful discussion. That goes straight to the issue here. Eric's also already made the point, even though I use the phrase second class, I don't feel that quite so strongly, but it's never going to be the same as being in person. And yet I feel so strongly the importance of preserving this precious direct democracy that we have coming forward 2,500 years from Athens, for goodness sake. Let's make it possible. Let's take advantage of the technology that we have today. Simple words, allow people to come when they couldn't come otherwise. That's the short story.
All right, thank
Or
you.
does that make it?
David Carr, please.
You're muted, David.
Yeah, so I think Parashar actually pointed out that well, the main difficulty I see is getting I mean, having somebody's remote setup. I mean, for example, we've got David Allen, who is uncertain about his ability to participate here because of bandwidth issues.
Right.
This can affect people, and I guess what I wouldn't want to see is people who could be attending in person settling for the second best experience at home when they could have come in, and then they kind of cut themselves out.
Great, thank you. That's an interesting point.
Yeah.
Katie Bresnick, please.
I wholeheartedly support remote participation, which probably doesn't come as a surprise. I think given that there is, a delay in, let's say, a number of years before this would actually be possible, given the legislation that's required, the technology will catch up. Things have changed dramatically in the last couple of years that once we get to a point where we could use this, things would be a lot better. I think there will still be issues, but being remote and even second class, as David said, which I kind of agree with that sentiment, is better than not being able to come at all or not voting at all. And I think even if people choose to be home when they could have come in person, I think that's okay too. That means maybe you're maybe not someone who's interested more to listen than to engage in the conversation, which is okay. But I think we need to be more flexible, and this will be the way of the future, and we should pursue it as much as possible.
Good, thank you. Recognize Alice Kaufman, please.
So I don't want to be redundant to Katie, but I think I agree 100% with her viewpoints on this one. Remote participation allows people who are making those balancing choices in their lives every single day to choose whether to be there in person or to be there remotely. And if remotely is something that adds value to them to participate, then of course we should have it. And I think what we're being asked to, there's a process for us to even be able to do remote participation, and it's a fairly heavy lift. I think Carmen probably could speak to it quite eloquently.
Yeah.
That we have to ask for special legislation that would allow us to do this, even as an experiment. Having put one of these articles through town meeting myself, it can take years just to get onto the roster before the legislature decides, no, when there are enough communities who are willing or interested in the same thing, then we might take it up. And so I think part of the philosophical approach here has been how many communities are ready now to petition the legislature that would at least allow the study to begin. It's a long process to get on the list of the legislature, and every 2 years we go back to square one and we have to reapply and come back and ask again for special legislation. So it works in cycles, and I think there's, from my perspective, no harm in moving forward now.
Good, thank you, Alice. So yes, the participation is a good idea. Recognizing that there's a legislative process that we have to go through before it happens, before it can happen, and why not start? Parashar, I'll come back to you. I'm going to go to Eric Von Loon, please.
I too am strongly in favor of our recommending that we start the remote participation journey and effort. I had a very helpful conversation with David Allen to come up to speed on status in the legislature, and only 2 towns are now on board. The legislation itself is 4 sentences long, essentially. I mean, it's very, very brief and virtually identical. Slight wrinkles, the Concord draft versus Wayland. There are perhaps another 10 communities that are, quote, watching us, have interest, but those may be either private citizens or town officials, but who have not taken any kind of formal vote.
Yeah. So Eric,
if I could skip down to how much do we need to know before recommendation? What do we have to know about the technology? What do we have to know about the cost? I think given the absolutely certain timeline, we should not get bogged down in trying to come up with answers to questions that would be very complex.
So to paraphrase that, it's a good thing. The experience is a good thing. Go for it now, and just expect that we're going to have to figure it out. Don't wait.
Yes, and the one other thing that I would just say, building on what Alice said, I think that taking the tact of a certain small group of towns saying to the legislature, we'd like to have a pilot project of this, as opposed to we want the legislature to make this, the thing.
So Eric, sorry to jump in. We're going to have to talk about how. I think we recognize that the project of getting legislative approval is a project with a strategy involved. We'll come back to that. I think the thing I really want to get through is where everybody stands in the prospect, as it's a good thing or not. Parashar, I think I've heard from you. And Katie, have I heard from you? I'm going to go to Chase and then sweep back and see who I've missed. Also, Phil Swain, I want to come back to you as well, please. But Chase, please.
Yeah, I guess maybe just to steel man the other side. I feel like this is inevitable, and that kind of makes me sad, if I'm being honest. I feel like it gives us an opportunity to back out of the really hard work, which would be making this something that people wanted to participate in and would come and show up and would prioritize. I think if you can nail it from a tech perspective and you can let people vote, you are inevitably going to get a much larger participation. And if that is the goal, then we should use all technology possible. But if we're really like thinking about why this is unique compared to other forms of government across the country, can't put my finger on it, but you definitely lose something. And if corporate America is our guide, they thought work from home was going to give everybody 2 more hours of work a day, and it did.
Right.
And then they all
Right.
realized that they lost some heart and soul along the way, and they're bringing people back. And so I don't know how that might directly pertain, but listen, if you made me pick right now and I have to pick a side, I'd say go remote because it's inevitable, but it makes me sad, and there's probably unintended consequences of it.
Great, thank you.
Could I add a thought?
Not just yet, David, please wait.
With direct response to, I think that's terrific. Whenever.
Good, thank you. Phil, please, I'd like to get your opinion, please.
Well, I really just want to echo Chase. I think it's inevitable. But to me, Concord should be part of this because we have been generally on the forefront of innovations in town meeting and innovations in general. And it's inevitable that this technology will be brought in. And for us not to be part of the forefront of this would be like King Canute, trying to hold back the tides. It's inevitable. We should be part of it, and we should be leading to make it as best the best remote participation format as possible.
Nicely put. Thank you, Phil. Carmen, I'd like to go to you as an ex officio member and also the resident expert on town meeting. What are your thoughts on this prospect?
Well, I think that you all have pretty much covered the bases. There are real advantages to the notion. It does seem inevitable given the improvements in technology and the way we are living our lives as a society, but something is most definitely lost. A pilot program, I think, is probably the best approach with the legislature. And I would suggest to you that it could be worth a conversation with our legislators about how to approach it or what they think about the reaction to the bills that have been pending. One is from Lexington and its representative town meeting, and it doesn't, it's not apples to apples for us. But the other one is Wayland, which is open town meeting, and that's apples to apples. So lots to be learned there. I think, it would be a huge change, and no huge change goes into effect seamlessly.
Yeah.
There are always unintended consequences. There are hiccups that were not anticipated, and some people will be very upset about it simply because it's change. But other people will be pretty excited about it and more likely to participate. And I'll just tell you, and forgive me for those of you who've heard this story before, but when my daughter was in preschool, she had a day when she was supposed to write something about her mom, and one of the questions was, "What's your mom's favorite TV show?" And I had been watching Town Meeting on TV, and she wrote down that Town Meeting was her mom's favorite town. So, maybe that was prophetic.
That's funny. Thank you, Carmen. Parashar and then Katie, and we'll swoop back to the Davids.
Thanks. So just a couple thoughts. One is, hopefully we don't view folks participating remotely as second-class citizens, because I think, frankly, Carmen, at least Carmen's been moderator as long as we've lived here. You've done a terrific job of balancing the folks that are in the gym when that's been the case with the folks in the gym. So I think the outcome of how people feel if they're remote will be entirely dependent on the moderator and how inclusive that is, number one. The second point is, we should remember, we're talking about hybrid town meeting. Let's not forget that. So those of us that feel something is gonna get lost, will have a place to go. I suspect many folks will end up there, and there will be others, hopefully, that are additive that show up remotely. So let's not sort of spiral down this negative view that we're losing something. So that's all.
Thank you, Parashar. Katie, please.
I was going to make a similar point. I mean, I think maybe a little bit will be lost in some way having everybody in the same room together, but I think a lot will be gained because more people can participate and have their say heard. I'll just be happy to be there and voting instead of wishing to vote on my couch watching my TV. So I think it would just make a big difference for a lot of people. And a second comment I wanted to make is I've seen in some of the other reports kind of communities sitting and waiting to see what happens. Nothing is going to happen unless we do something. So I think that, you know, as others said, Concord can and should be on the forefront, and we shouldn't just wait and see what other communities do because this is inevitable and we should benefit from it as soon as we can, I think.
Good, thank you. David Carr, will go to you, please.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, so I think that part of the reason I think I'm wanted to work on this as David is not only that we can do this. If we do this badly, we could lose a lot. But if we do this really well, then it's mostly gain and very little loss. Which is what I'm hoping. I mean, we really started from the way town meeting is, the parts that we love about it, and just trying to make, just not to stop those things, but to just make them more accessible at home. So you need to be able to speak in the microphone. You need to be able to put in an amendment. We should see each other. You know, it's a little face, and not the way we can see each other on the Zoom meeting because you couldn't fit enough people. But you know, how small can you shrink down? And if you take the names off, because you don't have name tags on everybody in the crowd, right now in the gym and auditorium, you can see they're real people, but you don't know who they all are. So if you take out all those unnecessary things all those extra things that we've got in this little Zoom meeting here, and just make a little, you could fit a lot of people onto one screen. I mean, you could practically do the whole third room maybe in just one screen, and maybe you'd have to scroll a little bit if you have more than one screen full, but it could go pretty far.
Thank you. So I didn't think to actually write a motion around this, but I'm considering that a motion to the effect of the committee moves to endorse support for a home rule petition for remote participation would be something that we could vote on. Is that correct? The committee moves to endorse support. Well, okay. The committee supports a home rule petition for allowing piloting of remote participation of town meeting. Does that work?
Do we want to do that before we hear more from the survey or from forums? I mean, I'm hearing collectively there's general support here.
Sure. We do appear to have general support. So it's a good question, Kristen. Let's explore it. Why would we wait to endorse the prospect of moving forward with a petition?
No, I guess I was just curious, why we were going to ask in the survey,
Right.
and I think that was just maybe to report out, but Carmen and Eric also have.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay. Carmen, please.
I think Kristen's point is well taken. I think that it may be that there'll be nothing that comes from the facilitated meetings or from the survey that causes anyone on the committee to change their minds about supporting this notion, but it's always possible that something will. And I think that it will be more meaningful to those people who participate in the public forum and respond to the survey if they know that decisions aren't made before their input is received.
Well, Carmen, Kristen, thank you so much. You're completely right about that in my view, and I'm really thankful that you each brought that up. So thank you. Eric, your hand has gone down. So let's think a little bit more about next steps then.
I mean, I think it would definitely, I think keeping track of the things we want to vote on would be a good thing. And like, this would be like, this is a solution that, you know,
Yeah.
we're going to vote on. And then we'll kind of keep adding to that list. And so we'll know what's going to move over to the formal recommendation column.
Sure. Okay, good. So definitely a potential vote for us is to endorse a home rule petition towards enabling a pilot for remote participation for town meeting.
Well, and actually
Uh,
that's interesting, right? Because this would be something that goes to town meeting, right? So that's why you want to do it, because this would have to go to the warrant. Okay. So
Yeah, exactly.
you want to
Yeah.
you want to vote on it before we go to the select board. So okay. So
Exactly.
there's
Yeah.
a
So
time restraint on this one. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about this again, I think. I sent out that MMA document as soon as I saw it today, but I think it actually really is really valuable for each of us to read it carefully, because I think the questions raised there are good. I sent out these slides this afternoon because I wrote them this afternoon. But I think one of the questions around that I would expect the select board actually to ask about is, what obligation are we taking on when we attempt to offer remote participation service at town meeting? Parashar, please.
I guess a question, because the home rule petition, we don't necessarily have to copy Wayland, but is it true that if we go forward with a home rule petition, that you actually have to participate in a pilot? So in other words, there's a lot of questions there around remote participation, technology, and all that. If I feel like, given the short timeline that we have between now and recommendations, to drill down into those level of details before deciding or even doing work on it is almost putting the cart before the horse. So if we can agree that we like the principle, recognize that there's some challenges, we can still, I think, endorse the notion of getting started. And in the meanwhile, we're going to have at least a couple of years to nail down some of those answers.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
Yeah.
we've got to focus on those.
Yeah, fair enough. Thank you. I think, again, another set of uncertainties is around the technology and the operation. I wanted to call out the Dave Bernstein and Wayland has a well thought through vision document for how operation of remote participation could work. It's conceptual. It's not real software. It is in a sense a set of wireframes capturing what they believe both the system architecture and the kinds of interfaces that would support that experience would be. But that's a very interesting vision. I think another area to research would be sort of vendors right now that are supporting remote town meeting. But I think there as we talk about what really would be getting into in terms of a pilot, in terms of an experience, there's really a lot of work to do to flesh that out. I just want to skip ahead to the question that we've already raised that I think is something that I think we would want to make a proposal to the select board if we have time in December, and if not, certainly after that, which is how would the project of legislative approval work? And again, David Carr and David Allen have been working in this area. David Bernstein and the Elvis Committee and Wayland have been working on this. Absolutely, I think we would need to have a conversation with our representatives. Even to write the warrant article, I think we would want to talk to our representatives. I think it's a big question about, what do they need to know in order to support our initiative, this initiative? What does the select board need to know to support this initiative? And then, there is the question about, do we try to go it alone, quote unquote, or is there a greater likelihood of success if we do team up with a few other towns, with, probably Wayland in the lead there. So again, a lot of questions around the project of legislative approval. And the question is going to be, how much of a story do we need around that before we go to the select board or before we go to town meeting, if in fact we do that with this. Katie, I'll recognize you and then we'll go to David Carr, please.
Maybe something to remember is that we have all the work done by David and David for the last warrant, so we can leverage those pre-existing materials. And I think that was already reviewed by the select board. So I think using what they've come up with and seeing what kind of additions we want to do from there or edits might be a place to start.
Good point. I'll just to slightly correct the record. Scott Gillis and Mark Martinez were the authors of that citizen
apologies.
petition. There was a lot of work that I think happened in common between the work of David Allen and David Carr and the petition that was submitted by Mark and Scott. But it's a fair point that we already have a thing to work from.
Thank you for the correction. I appreciate it.
Yeah, fair enough. David Carr, please.
Yeah, just want one point that came up. I think would we be forced to do this? And I think it's very important that is my recollection of the petition, as Wayland put it in, was that the town may offer hybrid voting, not must.
Yeah.
Which to be honest,
Yeah.
I mean, with any one of these technology things, I think you with an unproven thing, you do need that out. So
Yeah.
I would keep that may in there.
Yeah. Yeah. In bold. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you. Parashar, please.
Yeah, I'm gonna say the same thing here. I mean, Eric, is your vision here that we, the committee, develop a plan for the board to get approval, or what's the purpose behind? I understand these questions have to be answered. I guess the question is, are you suggesting that we as a committee should develop the plan and give it to the board and say, you ought to do the following, or are we simply saying endorse it and urging the board to go do the work?
Yeah, that's a really really appreciate your question.
The reason I say this is,
Yeah.
frankly, the coordinated petition, we can sit here and say we gotta coordinate.
Right.
Probably be helpful to have those informal conversations with Wayland and other towns.
Yeah. Well,
Wellness.
yeah, I think bluntly, right? If we really want it to happen, we're gonna have to set the plate. I think, if we want this outcome, right, then I think we need to go to the select board and to our representatives with at least an initial plan. And they can go, yeah, we like that, or no, we can do better. But if we simply say, hey, we think it's a good idea, can you go figure it out? I don't believe that. What do I know, right? You know more than I do.
No, I think there's something in the
yeah.
middle, I guess is what I'm
Yeah.
saying. For example, I think we can be a bit more directive in our motion. That we urge the select board by such and such a date to explore various options to make this happen, right? Something like that.
Right. Right.
And that's a little bit more forceful than we simply endorse. But that way we urge them, and maybe even have, for example, them report back to the next town meeting on the status or something like that.
Yeah.
To really keep them on track.
Yeah. One second, Carmen. I think so. One thing that Wayland has is that they had a committee like ours in about 2010, and Dave Bernstein actually was a chair of that committee, and so that was almost 15 years ago. So they still have an ongoing town meeting committee. The vast majority of the work of that committee is focused on the operational support of electronic voting. There's a 7-person committee that basically, instead of tellers, they've got this committee sort of acting as the tellers for electronic voting. And as well, that group has done a lot of work in terms of an architecture and vendor qualification for supporting remote participation. But that committee has existed over multiple years. And I think that if Concord were to undertake a petition and to undertake the project of, making piloting remote participation, I think that they would need, my guess is that they would need a committee as well. Some sort of organizational continuity over multiple years. And that would need to be, part, something that's either managed, through the moderator or through the select board. And I don't know the answer for that, but I think that, again, if we really want this to happen, I think we need to raise the question as to sort of how this project over the years is going to be managed. Let me go to Carmen, please.
Thanks, Eric. I just want to say, from a kind of process point of view, I would envision that this committee will be making a series of recommendations. And the recommendations will be made, you are a committee that is created by town meeting, not by the select board, but your recommendations can be to town meeting and to the select board. And you certainly can propose timelines or implementation plans for recommendations that you don't feel are ready to launch immediately. And if you think through, well, we recommend pursuing this concept. And to implement this concept, we think the following things need to happen. We think we need a committee to develop what a pilot program would look like, to stick with the legislative effort, to et cetera, and to work through that timeline. And I don't think you need to feel pressured that you need to have things ready for delivery and ready for immediate implementation. If there are things that you recommend but believe needs further study or further work, and you can see what that further work is, and maybe you have a recommendation of a plan for taking on that additional work. And I'll remind the committee that I believe your charge says you can exist for another year if you recommend to the moderator that we keep you on for further work beyond your report to town meeting. And I'm actually going to have to sign off, but before I do, I just want to, any other questions for me before I have to sign off for this meeting?
No, nothing that we need to do tonight, Carmen. Thank you from my perspective.
Thank you all. You're all doing a great job. I'm
Good.
very impressed with the dialogue and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. Let me recognize Katie Bresnick and then I'll go to David Allen.
Just in terms of process, so the only way that we could request a home rule petition is if we have a warrant article which is voted on at town meeting to give the select board approval to pursue the home rule petition. Is that right?
That's my understanding.
So if we make a recommendation and don't have a warrant article, this will then drag on for additional years until a warrant article exists. I am in favor of figuring out how we get a warrant article, even if it's not a concrete plan, to allow the select board the ability to petition, even without this being a full-fledged plan. I think that would still be appropriate with the details to be worked out, given how long it takes to put this into action.
Good, thank you. Let me go to Alice Kaufman, our former select board member.
I think the way that Katie just explained it is correct. What you do is you would it'd be this committee's recommendation that we adopt. It could be the same language that David Allen and the crew has already developed, that would ask the legislature for the permission to execute, and whether we call it a pilot or whether we want the authority to for remote participation. And so that then goes to town meeting, and it can either be submitted again by citizens as this last time it was, or it can be submitted by this committee, or it could be submitted by the select board. But it goes to town meeting for a town vote. And then if it's approved at town meeting, it then gets sent in its formal form to the legislature for them to take action. As far as the strategy, that's something that can come afterwards. If we know that we want to pursue the option for at least for getting in the roster for potential exploration of remote participation, we do that now. And as more towns are thinking about whether to do this or not, they come together on their own. It's almost an organic synthesis of ideas. And that's when a bigger strategy evolves, or our legislators come back to us and say, you know what, we're hearing that there are communities all around here that are interested in this. Why don't you guys all work together? So the strategy doesn't have to be fully thought out in advance. But the idea is that Concord wants yet our independent authority to go ahead and apply, ask the legislature for the authority for remote participation.
Thank you, Alice.
Eric will correct me if I got any of that wrong.
I just have one follow-up, which is I'm still sort of processing the question. So I think it goes back to Parashar's question. So are we going to take responsibility for socializing this idea? Reaching out to Wayland or to our representatives. Who takes the initiative here, I guess is the question. Let me go to Parashar, and then I want to go to David Allen, who's been waiting.
Yeah, so Eric, I think we can, I think informally socializing it with representatives, I think makes perfect sense. We're gonna be socializing it with the select board. I think that's perfectly fine, right? But then let's get a little bit, exactly, I won't repeat what Carmen and Alice just said. Enough detail, enough push, and then I agree with you, we need to focus body, whether it's us, somebody else, something over time to push this.
Good, thank you. David Allen, please.
It's a delight to see the prospect that the committee would lend itself to spreading this across Massachusetts. Some know that David Carr and I are already involved in doing that. In fact, we work quite closely with Dave Bernstein in Wayland on Elvis. I was on the phone with Dave today, for instance. So pleased that he and Eric are moving forward, because I think the two chairs need to do that. Others know as well that we are working directly with the two representatives, Carmine Gentile, who of course represents Wayland and promoted all of this to begin, and fortunately Simon Cataldo as well. In simple words, we ought to be coordinating our activities here. Frankly, it's going to be a real challenge to get other towns on. Dave's already been out and Dave Bernstein already made many presentations. What you come to here, in my view, is the most important thing the committee can do, which is to move forward with a warrant article that the select board then present to the legislature. That's the only way you get a critical mass. If you've got a bunch of folks needing to get something done and all together at one time, folks have got to have the courage to step up to the plate, even though they don't have all the I's dotted and the T's crossed, and claim to move together. I've got a couple of other points, but I think I ought to be quiet now.
All right, thank you, David. Katie, and then Kristen, please.
Maybe just to suggest a path forward is to have either the original authors of the warrant article for next year resubmit that article, and maybe we read it over and make sure that jives with our understanding of how this should go, or have the select board do something. So either one of those two options, and then suggest that a committee is convened to work on this specific issue after it's approved by town meeting. If that sounds right to folks on the call.
I think what I think is that we're getting into strategy about this a bit, and I think we should reflect on it and ask some questions offline to different parties. I think how the select board, this current select board, would like us to engage. I don't know. I think understanding more about from the perspective of our representatives, both through David Allen and David Carr's experience with them, and also speaking with them directly, which might be a point that Eric Van Loon is going to make. I think we have a bunch of ideas at this point. I feel like we need a little bit more information before we articulate a strategy of any kind.
Maybe
short of,
Maybe just one additional point. I believe that the recommendation from the select board last year was to approve that warrant article. So it could be that they're already in support of that, which may help things be a little bit easier, but I understand the need for some additional discussion on strategy.
It's a different instance. Formally the select board said, hey, let's have the town meeting committee figure it out, right? And that was a lead position as well on the 3 articles. So I just don't know. I mean, I think we have to treat it as basically as a new at bat, basically. Eric Van Loon, please, and then Kristen.
Yeah, I just want to say that part of the whole process of creating this committee to do it is to give the proposal broader legitimacy and broader support. So I think we will work very closely with the Davids and the people who submitted it before, but part of what the select board is looking for, part of what town meeting voters will want to hear is that we're making the recommendation. We're supporting and presenting the warrant article, and it's legitimizing because we've done a survey and we've done a hearing and we've checked out what other towns are doing. You know, we've done all that stuff.
Yeah. So just to be really clear, right, we think it's a good idea, but there are significant uncertainties around the tech. You know, we'll learn more about the tech, and I think there are significant uncertainties about the form of the service that we would offer in terms of what the policies are going to be. And so I think, I feel confident that well, we'll see what the public says through the survey and so on, but we need to qualify our recommendation as well. We think it's a good idea, but we don't really know how it's going to work yet. But what we really want is the right to figure it out. Kristen, please.
I just lament, I guess, that the co-petitioners weren't on this call. We've been going to David Allen, David Carr, who are very knowledgeable about all these things. And I guess I just overlooked the fact that, this was originally proposed by other petitioners. And so, yes, thank you, Scott. I know you're on. I'm sorry that we didn't hear from you because I don't want to, I don't want this committee to take credit for work that you've done to this point. And I definitely want to make sure that, in ongoing discussions, these questions that we had, if you're like, hey, already checked that out, here's some information. And you and Eric Moore may have talked already, but I just want to make sure, you guys prepared everything, you took it to town meeting and we're like, oh, we're not going to talk about it now, the committee has to. And so I don't want to exclude any work that you've done up to this point that would inform things.
That's a nice point, Kristen. Thank you. Scott Gillis, you have an opportunity to speak if you'd like one. Just looking at the microphone.
Sure.
Yeah, Scott, I'll recognize Scott Gillis. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric. I think when all the people who signed the warrant article petition in the first place, a large number of people in Concord, the article was very simple. It was simply asking the town to authorize the Board of Selectmen, not require the Board of Selectmen, simply to authorize them to put forward a home rule petition. And it was not asking the town to decide whether they ever wanted to do remote voting, just to give us the option. It was a very simple, focused article. In the presentation, we tried to talk about a lot of the issues around why we might want to do it, how we might want to do it, but we tried to make the point that this is not about voting philosophy, this is not about technology, this is about trying to get the state rules off of our backs and give us as a town the right to explore remote voting and use remote voting in hybrid meetings should we choose to. So I was delighted. I think I heard the committee basically say that that's what you're comfortable with and recognize that there's a lot of work between getting the right to do it and actually implementing it. But it was a very simple article. And if that's what you'd like to go forward with, I think the idea of having this committee submit a motion on an article to town meeting at our next town meeting so that the process of getting permission from the state of Massachusetts can start sooner rather than later would be fabulous.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Thank
You're
you. Katie Bresnick, please.
Maybe just one final comment. I think my questions are surrounding like, what's the process to get this done? And I think we are overcomplicating it a little bit. So what I'm really trying to understand is, because we do need to make these recommendations to the select board by mid-November. We don't need to have all the answers figured out, it sounds like, but we just need to figure out who's going to do what. So I urge us to maybe have that be the focus, is who's going to do what and what's the most appropriate way to go about doing this, knowing, or I guess socializing, that this warrant article would have the support of the committee, or how we best do that. But I don't think we need to have all the answers now, but would like to see this move forward for 2025 town meeting.
Great, thank you, Katie. David Allen, last words, and then I think we need to move on.
Thanks. On the text for a home rule petition, let us contribute, please. It must be the same across all the towns, and it's got to be something like 10 towns. Practically speaking, that means we've got to get our heads together with Wayland right now. But in addition, the representatives, frankly, I don't think we're quite at the point that we have the text, but we're talking about a mechanical thing. We can get there. Very quickly, David and I met with the 2040 working group of MMA. We got to know them 4 or 5 years ago. Joy to get to know those people. I can report to you their views have evolved, in some cases rather significantly, from what you find in the report, because I've stayed in touch. Finally, Chase is pointing out that, gee, don't have to do all that hard work. Guess what? The whole point of a good remote participation is they also have to do the hard work, the folks that are at home. That is, they can't run off and chat with their neighbor or some such. They have to be sitting in front of that screen. And more than that, much more importantly, it's about deliberation. Town meeting is deliberation. The vote comes at the end, but town meeting's about deliberation.
Thank you, David.
Just noticed. Thank you. And thank you for this wonderful discussion. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. So moving forward, the other thing we were going to talk about, I recognize we're not going to go past 9 o'clock, is less time at town meeting. And again, the simple questions, right? Is this a good idea? How much impact really can it work? Would something else be better? And so again, less time at town meeting, the idea that somebody can pick and choose when they come to meeting. I think even that is their points of view about that, right? I mean, the pro is that it's what people do now, right? And so for us, I think the perspective is, do we help enable participation when it's sought, when I just want to come and vote on the school budget and then go? The con, and I think this was articulated by a former select board chair, was that, not this person's words, my words, but town meeting is a dedicated conclave, right? You show up for all of it. And so I think there are different perspectives about how people should be involved with town meeting. And do we have, as a group, a perspective about, do we want to really, again, kind of lean into that town meeting is something you come to all of it for? Or do we want to lean into town meeting as a thing that we might want to make it possible to really budget their time? Do we have any opinions about that? Katie?
I think if we can make town meeting one day, it can be something that you show up for the whole thing. But if it's not possible to make it one day, I think it's very unrealistic to expect that people are going to show up for the whole thing.
So one day, thank you. I don't disagree with you. I want to say, is one day 1 hour? Is one day 6 hours, right? Because if it's 6 hours, we're still going to get people making choices about going to the whole thing. So Parashar, please.
Yeah, I think not coming is also making a choice. So this notion of we need to have everybody come for the whole thing, whether it's a day or 2 days.
Right.
Frankly, if they don't want to come, that's a choice they're making, that they're leaving those decisions to others.
Yeah.
Whether they trust them or not, if they don't trust the decision or don't like it, they
Yeah.
can change their mind next year. So
Yeah.
I don't think we should get too caught up on sort of a positive element of showing up.
Got it. Thank you. Kristen, please.
In the Westford 2008 report, they looked into kind of this issue, which at the time they were calling, it's stacking, right? People,
Right.
kind of came, and they didn't necessarily find that it was a problem. It's a
Right.
democratic option available to all voters on all sides of a controversial warrant article.
Right.
And they recommend that it could be mitigated by better communication and better informed electorate, which is kind of what Chase is saying, like,
Right.
and that their kind of conclusion in 2008 was there should be no rules about when individual voters or groups can enter or leave. So to
Right.
your point, should we just kind of make it easier for people to vote on what they want? And then,
Right.
like Parashar is saying, it means that they're okay with everything else.
Cool. Good. I'm happy to move forward. I don't think we need to vote on this, but I think as a sort of a philosophy of our thinking about interventions. Yeah. So I came up with two things that again help people budget. One is what I've been calling marquee items. I think we've seen these called before, high interest articles. And so there's a bit of a current practice, right? How that's determined is really through the moderator's research, through the process of the warrant development and the pre-meeting hearings and what she sees in the bridge. The moderator has, I think, purview over really the specific meeting order, but the select board is the body that groups on the warrant order itself. So I think there's some questions there. Again, for marquee items, what are good bets? The school budget, capital projects, certain kinds of zoning bylaws, things that represent change, could be cultural change to Concord. And then the question there really though is, I think marquee items are probably their current practice. They're not a bad idea. But I think this, do we try to have all of the marquee items in one night? So it's sort of the big night, so that I only have to negotiate to get to meeting once, or do we sort of, over the multiple nights of meeting, assuming that we have multiple nights of meeting, do we lead off each night with a marquee article? And so the question is sort of, do we look at marathon or multiple arrangements? I don't know. We have a question in the survey around preferences for sort of how meetings are arranged. So in a way, there's not too much to talk about with this right now. I think there's an opportunity to better research what could be a marquee item, or what should have been a marquee item. But I think here's a proposal that we can make that doesn't seem to take a lot of discussion. But with that said, I don't know if there's anything that we want to talk about with this. Kristen, please.
The only thing I would mention about the batch citizen petitions to one night is, typically they kind of dovetail into if they're related to other items.
Alice Kaufman, please. You're muted, Alice. Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
Please take it
Okay.
from the top.
Okay, I think we want to recognize that all of the marquee items and the way that you presented this have been discussed and tried for at least the terms that Eric has been the moderator and for Carmen as well. Changing the order, consolidating the consent order, all these things have been done. Marquee items on the top, marquee items on the bottom, marquee in the middle. So the ideas here are not new. I'm just, not that we have to be new on everything, but these are the key issues that if we go back to the 2009 report from Concord, I'm sure every one of these are in that still. So I think we recognize that these have all been tried without a single decision about the best, because people are different. We change it from year to year. Our tolerance changes. The people who show up are different. And so it's a matter of trying.
It's a really interesting point, right? And so one can make the point, as you just did, there's not a lot of juice left in that orange to squeeze out. I think, a question, I guess, is does the moderator have all the purview that she needs to make these decisions about what goes in the marquee or not? A different article, a different perspective would be, are there ways to improve the process so that it works a little bit better? And frankly, right, that's an area where we need to talk in depth with the moderator. and see if there's any ground left to try there. But your point's well taken, Alice. We've been trying this stuff for at least 30 years. Parashar, please.
Yeah, I was gonna say something similar. I think, just based on, and I don't recall if Eric shared the raw responses I got back from the survey.
I'm not sure, actually.
Yeah, but if,
Yeah.
scrolling through the responses from the various towns, I'll go back to what I said earlier at the meeting. I think it's a combination. The reason why I think we in Concord appear to have longer meetings, and my only other end is Holliston, where we lived for 15 years, which were shorter also, is we tend to talk a lot.
Yeah.
No, I'm serious about this. I mean, what else explains all these other towns? I
Right.
see 4 shorter nights here, Eric, and I think the other moderators would have a heart attack
Sure.
when they see 4 nights. And so I think it would be really helpful to get the perspective of Eric and Carmen maybe together at the next meeting.
Mhm.
Is do you feel that culturally, as a moderator, you're not able to relatively early on tell folks, look, we've heard 5 different pros, 3 different cons,
Right.
I'm gonna call for a motion and end it?
Good. I think that's nice. It's right on it's right on their agenda, actually. So thank you. So I'm looking at the clock, Katie, as well. So I don't feel like we have a lot to talk about here with this item, or these items. So I just want to move forward to queuing up our next meeting, right? So we're going to meet on the 15th. We're going to talk about a shorter meeting overall. There are a few things that I'd like to be able to have a good discussion around, which requires doing some research around what the current practice is, what can be improved, do we think? Are there obstacles to improving? Anything like that? And so my hope is that, I kind of took the lead with the remote voting stuff or remote participation stuff. And I've done a lot of work on the clickers question, and as well on the remote voting, the referendum ballot question. But I'm wondering if people can kind of take a topic, basically, right? Eric, for example, you don't have to say yes, but could you look into opportunities for expanding the consent calendar above and beyond what we're doing now, and so on. So again, my goal is that for our next meeting, when we're talking about expanding the consent calendar, explicit public norms for debate, including the question, Parashar, you just raised. Can the moderators say, please, we get to the point? Citizen petitioners, beginning with advisory petitions, online straw polls during meeting, and the warrant briefing book. Are there folks who want to kind of take the lead on researching and presenting these topics to our group? Kristen Haggerty, I'll go to you, please.
I'm not raising my hand necessarily to take the lead, but I am interested to know if Eric Van Loon is definitely going to be there on the 15th. And if so, I think it would be great if Eric Van Loon, Carmen, and Ned Perry, are kind of previous moderators, because these, I think, are all things that are in control of the moderator, by the moderator. And so, except for quickly leveling up low information voters, I would love to kind of have a forum of moderators where we just kind of pick their brains. They compare their different styles and strategies, and then we kind of extrapolate information from there. Because I think between at least the 3 of them being so recent and our questions, I think that would give us kind of the best bang for our buck.
Let's go to Eric Van Loon. Thank you, Kristen.
I plan to be there on the 15th, and I'm certainly happy to participate. I'm sure Carmen will. Ned, hard to say. One of the interesting things is on some of these, for example, I know Carmen and I have different points of view. So it won't be just looking at sort of the way we looked at the peer towns and come to the conclusion, well, everybody's come to the same conclusion.
That's what I think is so great, right?
Yeah.
Because so that's why I think it's really critical that we kind of hear multiple viewpoints.
And having said that, the fundamental underlying all this is it is up to the moderator's discretion. And there's a huge body of Massachusetts law that stands for that proposition. So, of course, it's appropriate for us to make recommendations, and we'll want to, but it'll be up to Carmen to decide what she wants to implement or not.
Good, thank you. I think we can also think about the next moderator, whoever that is and whatever that is. But that will be their discretion as well. Thank you, Eric. Eric, can you reach out to Ned Perry to see if he can attend, or you want me to do that?
I can do that, sure.
All right, thank you. Alice Kaufman, please.
I wanted clarification on suggest that citizen petitioners to begin with advisory petitions.
Yes.
Tell me what you're thinking.
That's my language again, sorry. So a citizen petition can address a number of different things, bylaw, land purchase or sale and so on. But my observation, I talked about this with Carmen a bit, is that if you want your citizen petition to succeed, you have a better chance by leading with an advisory petition than other forms. If you want to take the town, if you want the town to take an action that hasn't been through a committee process yet, and you want to get public support, if you want an expression of public support for that, a more parsimonious strategy is to put up an advisory petition before the town, as opposed to, for example, a bylaw. Get people to articulate that they like your idea, then it can go back to a committee process. But when you look at bylaws and other things, you engage a whole lot of the legality or questions of legality that otherwise you can kind of step around with an advisory petition. So that's what I'm talking about.
Okay. I was afraid that's what you were talking about. I would disagree 100% with that.
Sure.
And I just want to say, having brought citizen petitions to town meeting, it is a lot of work to do all of the legwork, to meet with the committees, to get people in town on board or not on board with what you're thinking.
Right.
You have to do your own socializing through town with your idea before it would come to town meeting, so that people are not surprised by what you're saying or what you're bringing. To say you go with an advisory petition says, citizens, we don't really want to do what you want to do. We'll take it as an advisory, and the select board can just blow it off.
I see.
And it never has to be taken up again. And a person who is invested in moving something forward doesn't want to get an advisory petition. They want to get to the step of action. And all that homework is done in the months or the year before town meeting, before they're ready to take it to town meeting.
Good. Thank you. Thank you. That's clear. Thank you. Chase and Parashar, please. And then we're going to conclude as soon as we can. Chase, please.
Yeah, just on the topic of the communication things, I know it sounds like there may not be anything needed in the near term on that. We were going to wait until after bringing this to the select board, but is it worth kind of just itemizing out what the possible communication things would be? I'm just getting a sense there's a lot of rules. Like, I don't want to operate under the assumption we can do things we can't do.
Yeah. Let me loop back to you individually, because we've outlined a bunch of stuff around communication. And the warrant briefing book, I think, in the context of people getting informed about what's going to be at the meeting and then being able to access information at meeting, is sort of the center to that. But I think, a lot of stuff we can talk about with communication. The driver for the select board meeting is going to be what goes into the warrant in terms of what gets communicated, and then also thinking about the structure, if any changes to the structure of the pre-town meeting hearings. Let me just loop back to you. We can talk more about it, because I feel like it still hasn't really answered your question. Sorry. Parashar, please.
Yeah, very quickly. I agree with what Alice just said, and we would actually turn this around. Maybe another suggestion is the town should make town council available for advice to citizens before they finalize the warrant. Because I think that's where a lot of the time comes up, because they've got a missing comma or parentheses, etc. And,
Uh-huh.
maybe that conversation could either steer the citizen to say, hey, let
Mm-hmm.
me come back next year, or
Right,
fix whatever needs fixing, so we waste less time in front of town meeting fixing things.
right. Okay, good, thank you. So just to wrap up, right, for our next meeting, we're gonna talk about these things. There's a proposal, which sounds like a nice one, to have at least Eric Van Loon and Carmen Rice talking about their perspective as moderators on some of these items, what the potential is, what the pros and cons are. We'll see if Ned Perry can join as well. I think the citizen petition thing, clearly different perspectives on that. I think Parasha, you're suggesting is concrete. Is anybody else want to take any leadership on any of these topics, or are we going to wing it at the next meeting? I hear winging. So there it is, man. So with that, it's been a long meeting tonight. We've talked about a lot. I think we've covered some good ground. Thank you everyone for your contributions. And we'll meet again in 2 weeks. And again, the big question for 2 weeks is going to be concretely, what is the forum format? And then this discussion here. So thank you everyone and good night.